Hello, everyone. Michael Clark. I am the host of the CCA's Leadership Development Community Podcast. My guest today, Charles Cowling, President-elect of the International Actuarial Association. Charles, I want to continue our discussion about the IAA. In our last segment, we talked a lot about the mission of the IAA and giving people a little bit of a primer on what the IAA does. You recently came back from the International Congress of Actuaries, which was held down in Sydney, Australia, in connection with the Actuaries Institute of Australia. For those who aren't familiar with the International Congress of Actuaries, what is it? And from your perspective, having just come back from it a couple months ago, what are some of the highlights of this event?
Okay, so this is effectively the event that's been going since, I think it was 1895. And it's actuaries from around the world getting together, and it's probably the largest international event for actuaries from all around the globe who get together to share ideas, to share expertise, experience of the latest actuarial sort of thinking and activities of actuaries. I mean, there were so many highlights. I mean, Sydney's a wonderful place anyway, but and the Australians were wonderful hosts, and it was a great event to go to, and it was great to link up with actuaries from around the world and meet old friends and make new friends. But there were many highlights of the event itself, and we had some great plenary speakers. So I particularly remember Dame Inga Beale, who was the CEO at Lloyd's of London, talking about change management and trying to modernise insurance practices, particularly around a very old-fashioned male-dominated setup, which was what Lloyd's of London was like. And she was fabulous, talking about tackling all sorts of issues around change management. Then we had a wonderful session from Professor Tim Flannery, who talked about some of the real serious business of climate change, and he was inspirational. And then there were many really good, engaging sessions on the changing role of actuaries and the growing influence and challenge of AI and data analytics. I have to confess being quite flabbergasted when I was in Australia to discover that it was either 2/3 or 3/4, but the large majority of new fellow actuaries in Australia are in data analytics. And it's only a small percentage that now do pensions and insurance and everything else.
Wow.
The large majority in data analytics. So hearing some of the stuff that was going on was really quite exciting. I particularly loved my favourite session, I have to say, probably the whole conference, was delivered by John Olokuru, if I've got his name correct, which was on how AI was being used to help small-scale farmers in Kenya and Ghana. And it was all around linking sophisticated weather apps to insurance contracts, helping these farmers plant the right crops at the right time, depending on all sorts of very clever weather information at a very local level, but thereby also making insurance more affordable and accessible, and making the whole, or frankly, the whole food security of that region stronger, reducing protection gaps, enabling insurance to apply much more widely. And it just felt that this was actuaries at work solving real necessary society problems, and it was just wonderful. And it just made you think that there must be so much more of that sort of thing out there that actuaries are doing and could be doing, and that's what the Congress is great for. And then also another highlight I've got to mention was they had a Young Actuaries World Cup, which have been running in the run up to the ICA, where a whole group of individual actuaries put in entries of ideas of things that they were doing or wanted to do. And it was just great to see all these young actuaries coming up with new stuff and new ideas to apply actuarial science. So it's really infusing and engaging and inspiring to sort of see the stuff that's going on around the world.
Any idea on how many attendees there were at the ICA?
I think they had 1,400 was what the number I saw bandied around. Now that was a combination of in-person and virtual attendees. But I think they got above 1,400. There were certainly many hundreds in person and more hundreds joining online. So it was, yeah, hugely successful.
So how frequently do these International Congress of Actuaries happen?
So it used to be every 4 years. This last one got delayed because of the COVID pandemic. So it was 5 years previously back to Berlin in 2018. The next one was already scheduled to be 2028, which will be in Tokyo, which will be fabulous. And I think we've now decided that because they are so successful and because there's a real appetite there, that we'll move to holding them every 3 years.
Yeah, actually, just on the IAA's website, and I don't mean to correct you here, but it looks like 2026 for Tokyo.
Sorry, that's 3 years in the future, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
2026. My maths is badly letting me down.
That's all right. Yeah, so that information is actually already out there on the IAA's website. The 33rd International Congress of Actuaries that's going to be held in Tokyo in November of 2026. And they've already got a website up there as well, ica2026.org. So something to keep an eye on. If you haven't been to Tokyo, it's a great place to put on the schedule. So yeah, this is a good opportunity to go and interact with colleagues from around the world as well. Charles, you had mentioned when we were talking a little bit about the sections earlier on that the sections put on symposia occasionally. What are those symposia? What's coming up as far as those are concerned?
So the sections do have a whole host of events that start at entirely virtual. So we hold webinars, or they hold webinars, and symposia and colloquia where people gather together. Sometimes sections get together and they will hold events as a whole or a group of sections. Sometimes they'll hold events separately. There is a big one coming up in Belgium, in Brussels. I haven't got the dates at my fingertips.
Let's see. The website is JOCO, JOCOS for Joint Colloquium 2024.org, and it looks like September of next year in Brussels.
Yes, September next year. So that will be a joint colloquium, I think, of most of the sections. So it will be quite similar to the conference, the Congress that we've just had in Sydney, because when they all get together, as they sometimes do, the events can reach a similar scale. But they're all, whether you go just to a 1 or 2 section event or to a multi-section event, Brussels next year will be fabulous.
Yeah, and actually on that JOCO2024.org website, there is a place where you can enter in your contact information to stay up to date with everything that's going on with that colloquia as well. So for anybody that's interested in potentially attending that next year, that's definitely a place I'd recommend. And then lastly, Charles, and we touched on this a little bit in our last segment, but for people that are interested in getting involved with the IAA, whether it's through any of the different areas of the IAA's mission or in some of these events, whether it's the section colloquia or an ICA in the future, how can individuals get involved with the IAA?
So it's very easy to join a section. Just go onto the IAA's website and follow the instructions. And I do really encourage that. It's a great way to link up with actuaries around the world. But as I mentioned earlier, I think we're always looking and reaching out to our member associations to come up with volunteers. And we're particularly interested in engaging with younger actuaries and new thinking. So one of the task forces that we put out a request for last week was we're looking at the actuaries of the future. And we want some people to help work on what we think the actuaries of the future are going to be doing and what they're going to need, and pooling what's happening already in different parts of the world, so that insights can be shared. So we're always looking at, so contact your own association. I'm not sure who that would be at the CCA, but I'm sure you've got somebody who would readily take a list of volunteers and put your name up.
Absolutely. One last question in this segment. You have quite the track record for volunteering within the IAA. You've been doing that for a long time. What have you gained from volunteering with the IAA specifically?
So you gain massively from the opportunity to share ideas, to hear what other actuaries are saying, to participate in not only debates and discussions, but just to be with other actuaries and learn with them. Just in the same way that we learn from people in our offices, in our work situations, you learn even more by exposing your experience to actuaries from very different backgrounds and doing different things. And it's also really stimulating and interesting. So I've loved doing all of that. And you learn communication skills and leadership skills and a whole host of other skills that you need to complement what we do in our day-to-day life anyway. So our work life is enhanced by what we're able to build through our volunteering, in my experience.
Oh, I love that. I appreciate you sharing that with us. All right, everyone. My name is Michael Clark, host of the CCA's Leadership Development Community Podcast. My guest on our podcast today is Charles Cowling, President-elect at the International Actuarial Association. And Charles, for this last segment, I love doing this as part of these interviews. I want to talk about your views on leadership. In our last segment, we touched on just barely your track record in volunteering with the IAA and some of the benefits that you've gained from that. Now, you volunteer in a lot of different places, not just within the actuarial profession. Even you've got some stuff outside of your work realm that you volunteer with. How has volunteering in general helped you become a better leader?
So diversity of thought I think is really important, and actuaries aren't all the same, but we have very similar skill sets, a lot of us, and we don't all think the same, but we perhaps don't have the full diversity of views and approaches to things that's out there. So in terms of learning from a leadership point of view, when you think of all the different skills, from learning how to chair things, listening skills, communication skills, how to motivate people, strategy skills, you gain all of these by interacting with people from different backgrounds who can bring very different perspectives and ways of doing things. And I just learn hugely from being around such people and trying to learn from them and see what they've got to offer. And in my experience, it's a lot, and I've learnt a lot from, I'm quite clear that although I give of my time, I learn as much as I give, and that's massively valuable.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, while it is a time commitment to volunteer, I feel the same way. You get a lot more out of that, especially at a personal level, than maybe what you put in. And I'll put in the plug here as it relates to making the case to your employer as to why they should give you time to do this.
Yes.
Right? It actually makes you better at your job, is what I found, because you will develop and learn new skills that you might not otherwise learn from your day-to-day job.
Completely agree.
So in thinking about people that you consider to be successful leaders, what traits do they have, and how do they demonstrate their leadership?
So it's multifaceted, I think. You can't pin it down to any one or two things, but for me, I guess there are a few really important things. One of the common factors I've seen is that successful leaders are really good at building great teams around them. They recognize that this isn't something that they can do. They've got to build a team to do it. And so successful leaders are people who are really good at building a team and working with a team. So they've got to be really good at listening to people, at listening to ideas, being challenged, to be accepted to be challenged. They've got to be really good at promoting diversity. It's no good having a bunch of people around you that think the same as you and just reinforce your particular view of the world. You want people around you that are going to tell you you've got it completely wrong, and to challenge your view of the world, and to get you thinking differently, and to ensure that when you're looking at problems, that you look at it from every possible angle. I think, and again, as part of that, successful leaders have got to be really good at engaging with people. They've got to be very good at gaining support and loyalty. That's part of building a team. But that, you've got to make it fun. You've got to, the team has got to want to work together. You've got to be good at building consensus. I think trust and integrity as part of that are massively important. You're not going to support somebody if you don't trust them. Building trust and integrity is massively important. And then perhaps the other thing that I sort of feel is really key for leaders is to be able to operate strategically and to focus on what's really important. Yes, you've got to get the detail right, and you need people around you that are getting the detail right and making sure that you've got all the bases covered or whatever. But you've got to be able to operate at a strategic level and be able to ensure that your team, that your organization, whatever it is that you're leading, does have a strong strategic sense of direction. And as a leader of anything, you've got to set goals and strategies that you can help guide through. So that sort of strategic vision and operating at that strategic level is really important.
No, I
guess they would be the main things that I would.
Yeah, no, it's a really good list. Listening, being open to new ideas, promoting that diversity of thought. I like that you threw in there too that it's important to have fun right? That's how you build those relationships
Ah,
of trust with the people that you're working with. And then really having that strategic mindset, which again, I'll tie back to what we were just talking about. For somebody that is looking for those opportunities to develop that strategic mindset, volunteering within the profession is a good way to do that. It's a nice, and I don't want to trivialize it by calling it inconsequential, but it's going to give you exposure to things that maybe you wouldn't again get in your day job. So I like that. All of those things on that list are great. So when you think about some of the people that you consider to be role models when it comes to leadership, how have you tried? Who are they? How do you try to emulate their examples? I'm curious as to your view on people that you consider to be successful leaders.
I've already mentioned Frank Reddington, and I'll mention him again, not just because he was the father of immunization theory and actuarial work and an inspiration for way ahead of his time, but he was also the actuary who once famously said, "An actuary who is only an actuary is not an actuary." He was very encouraging of trying to get actuaries to look wider than themselves and wider than just the profession of being an actuary. So for me, he's been inspiration on lots of levels. Other leaders, I think if you look to South Africa and Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela, if you want people who know how to engage other people, who know how to make them laugh and smile, whilst at the same time building loyalty and integrity and trust, you can't get better role models than them. I love my sport. There are many, many examples of great leadership in sport, particularly, I think I mentioned before about the importance of building teams and getting teams working well, and both attention to detail and making sure you've got everything covered, but just having a well-functioning team. And from a parochial UK perspective, in the UK we had Clive Woodward, who led us to Rugby World Cup glory and was an amazing leader, and David Brailsford, who was an amazing leader of British cycling and led us to great glory. But you could look at, Formula One's a great example, motor racing of teams where they have to work well. So some of the leaders there, you've got Toto Wolff at Mercedes and Christian Horner at Red Bull. So I think sport gives you a lot of examples of fantastic teamwork, and to see how some of those leaders operate in that sphere is quite inspiring, I find. And yes, I would love to be able to emulate some of their abilities.
Now, I should have asked where you're based in Manchester. Are you a Premier League fan?
So I was, but I'm based in Manchester, but I live in a town north of Manchester called Bolton. And I'm a great believer in supporting the local team. Now, my local team is Bolton Wanderers, rather than either of the Manchester big football clubs. And we were in the Premiership, but I'm afraid we haven't got the vast amounts of money. And in fact, we had a fabulous leader in the name of Sam Allardyce, who, although he had a budget a fraction of the Manchester Uniteds and Manchester Cities of this world, we competed, and we even went to Germany on one occasion and got an amazing result at Bayern Munich, one of the best clubs in the world. Little Bolton Wanderers. So I'm still a fan of my local club, and sadly they're no longer in the Premiership.
Someday. I love that. Maybe. About the Premier League and the whole promotion and relegation idea. I think it's brilliant. So, well, Charles, I want to thank you for joining me today on our Leadership Development podcast. For people that want to follow what's going on with the IIA, where should they go?
So start off by looking at the websites. Actuaries.org, you've already told, given the site. There's loads of information there, but also go to your local associations and ask. Please do find out about sections, because they do some really great work, and they would love your support.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you, Charles. The leadership development community of the CCA is open to any actuary. You can reach out to the CCA to join that community. And I want to thank Shannon Peterson of CCA staff for helping to organize today's interview, and to the Leadership Development Community Steering Committee. Please join us for upcoming CCA events, and follow us online on social media and our website. Until next time, thanks everyone, and appreciate you joining in. And thanks again, Charles, for your time today.
Thank you. My great pleasure.